Hey guys, welcome back to The Readers. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled people's story. Let me give you some background first. I work remotely as a software developer, which gives me flexibility, but also means I need a quiet, comfortable place to focus. When my grandmother passed away and left me her house, it seemed like the perfect opportunity for a fresh start. The house itself is this charming old farmhouse that's been in our family for decades. It sits on about 3 acres of land, and here's where things get interesting. The entire neighborhood around it was built maybe 30 years ago when some developer bought up all the surrounding farmland. My grandmother was one of those stubborn types who refused to sell when everyone else did. Good for her, honestly. The developer ended up building this massive subdivision called Whispering Pines all around her property, but she kept her little piece of paradise right in the middle of it all. When I was a kid, I used to visit her every summer and spend hours swimming in her kidney-shaped pool. Those are some of my best childhood memories. The house definitely showed its age when I inherited it. Everything was functional but dated, and the pool had been sitting unused for the past few years. The liner was cracked, the pump system was ancient, and the patio around it was crumbling. I decided to make it my first big project. Over the course of about 4 months, I spent close to $18,000 having the whole thing professionally renovated. New liner, completely updated filtration system, resurfaced patio, the works. It was a huge investment, but this was going to be my home for the foreseeable future. During the renovation process, I started noticing this woman from one of the neighboring houses. She had this habit of walking her tiny little dog very slowly along the property line, always looking over toward my house. Sometimes I'd catch her just standing at her upstairs window, staring out at the work being done. It gave me an uneasy feeling, but I figured she was just curious about the construction noise. The pool renovation was finally completed on a Thursday in late June. The contractor called to let me know everything was ready and I could start using it immediately. I was so excited to finally enjoy the fruits of all that labor and expense. That first Saturday was supposed to be my celebration day. The weather was perfect, hot and sunny, and I had the whole weekend planned around just relaxing by the pool. I remember setting up my lounge chair, grabbing a cold drink, and settling in to finally enjoy what I'd been working toward for months. The water was crystal clear, the new patio looked amazing, and I was feeling pretty proud of what I'd accomplished. I'd been sitting there for maybe 10 minutes when I heard footsteps coming around the side of the house. I looked up to see the same woman I'd noticed watching the construction work. She was walking directly toward my pool area with her arms crossed and this stern expression on her face. She didn't knock on my front door or try to introduce herself politely. She just marched right up to my new fence and started talking. She told me in this sharp, accusatory tone that the community pool wasn't open for unsupervised use, and I needed to leave immediately. I was completely confused at first. I thought maybe she was having some kind of mental episode or had gotten turned around somehow. I explained calmly that this was my house and my private pool, thinking that would clear up whatever misunderstanding was happening. That's when she really showed her true colors. She told me she was the president of the HOA and knew for a fact that this was an HOA asset. She was incredibly condescending about it, talking to me like I was some teenager who'd hopped a fence to sneak into a community pool. The way she looked down her nose at me and spoke made it clear she thought I was lying or trying to pull some kind of scam. I stayed calm and tried to explain the situation properly. I told her my name and that I'd inherited the house from my grandmother. I explained that the property had never been part of the HOA and offered to show her the survey map if she wanted to see the actual property lines. I figured once she saw the documentation, she'd realize her mistake and we could laugh about the confusion. She completely dismissed my offer to show her proof. She went on about how their bylaws were very clear and all amenities within the development's borders were managed by the HOA for paying members. The logic made no sense, but she stated it with such absolute conviction that I could tell she genuinely believed what she was saying. At that point, I'd had enough of trying to reason with her. I told her she was mistaken and that she was currently trespassing on my property. I asked her politely but firmly to leave. That's when she completely lost it. She pulled out her phone and started yelling about how I was the one trespassing. She said she was calling the police to have me removed and that I'd be sorry for messing with her. The whole thing was so ridiculous that I almost laughed. I just told her to do whatever she felt she needed to do and went back to my lounge chair. I wasn't worried about the police coming because I knew I was completely in the right. I had all the documentation to prove it. My grandmother had always been meticulous about keeping records, and when I inherited the house, I also inherited this thick binder labeled house documents that contained everything. The original deed, surveys, legal agreements, everything going back decades. The woman stayed there by my fence for the entire time we were waiting for the police, glaring at me and making comments about how I was going to regret this. About 15 minutes later, 2 officers showed up. I watched from my chair as she met them at the curb and gave them what I could only assume was a very dramatic version of events. When the officers approached me, they were definitely in official mode. They'd clearly been told I was some kind of trespasser who was refusing to leave. One of them told me they'd received a complaint and I needed to gather my things and leave the premises. I could tell they were just doing their job based on what they'd been told. Instead of getting defensive or argumentative, I stayed calm and told them I understood they were just doing their job. But the woman had deliberately misled them and filed a false report. I explained that I was the legal owner of the property and the person actually trespassing was her. I asked if they'd give me 60 seconds to provide documentation proving everything I was saying. I went inside and grabbed my grandmother's binder. When I came back out, I calmly presented them with the property deed in my name, the official county survey map showing the property lines, and the most important document, the signed and notarized exclusion agreement between my grandmother and the original developer from 30 years ago. The change in the officers' attitudes was immediate and dramatic. They spent several minutes reviewing all the documents, looking at each other with expressions that clearly said they'd been sent on a wild goose chase. One of them walked over to the woman, who was still standing by their patrol car looking smug and confident. I watched as the officer asked her if she had any documentation proving the pool was an HOA asset. She sputtered something about it being in their bylaws, and the officer explained that HOA bylaws had no legal jurisdiction over a property that wasn't part of their association. The look on her face when reality hit was something I'll never forget. The officers came back over to me and apologized for the confusion. They officially informed the woman that she was the one in the wrong and cautioned her about filing false police reports and trespassing on private property. She turned bright red, clearly humiliated, and stormed off without saying another word. I thought that would be the end of it, but I was wrong about that. The more I thought about what had happened over the next couple of days, the angrier I got. This woman had wasted police resources, tried to have me arrested for using my own property, and showed absolutely no remorse when she was proven wrong. I decided she needed to learn that actions have consequences. That Monday morning, I called a lawyer who specialized in property disputes and harassment cases. I explained the entire situation, provided copies of all my documentation, and asked what my options were. The lawyer was fascinated by the case and told me we had several strong legal grounds to pursue if the woman or HOA tried anything else. But more importantly, he suggested we take a proactive approach to prevent future incidents. He drafted what he called a formidable cease and desist letter addressed to the woman personally and to the entire HOA board of directors. This wasn't just a simple leave me alone letter, it was a comprehensive legal document that laid out exactly what had happened and what the consequences would be if it happened again. The letter recounted the entire incident in detail, including the false police report. It included notarized copies of all my legal documents proving ownership and the property's exclusion from the HOA. It formally demanded that the woman and any other HOA representatives never set foot on my property or contact me directly again. But here's where it got really interesting. The lawyer suggested adding what he called a malicious compliance element to really drive the point home. The letter demanded 2 specific things to settle the matter without a lawsuit for harassment. First, we wanted a formal written apology from the HOA board acknowledging their mistake. Second, and this was the part I really liked, we demanded that the HOA issue a public clarification in their next monthly newsletter and post it on the community bulletin board. The clarification had to state that my property was a private residence not affiliated with the HOA in any way, and that its amenities were not for community use. This was to prevent any future misunderstandings from other residents. The lawyer explained that this second demand was brilliant because it would essentially force them to publicly admit their mistake to the entire community. The woman who'd been so confident and condescending would have to face all her neighbors knowing she'd been completely wrong. We sent the letter via certified mail to ensure there was no question they'd received it. Then we waited. The lawyer told me that most people in situations like this either respond immediately with compliance or try to fight it and make things worse for themselves. He was curious to see which way this would go. About a week later, I got my answer. I received a very formal, clearly lawyer-approved apology letter in the mail. It was obvious their legal counsel had told them to comply immediately rather than risk a lawsuit they couldn't win. The letter acknowledged that there had been a misunderstanding and that my property rights would be respected going forward. But the real satisfaction came the following month. I have a friend who lives in the HOA community, and he sent me a picture of their monthly newsletter. Right there in a prominent section was the exact clarification my lawyer had demanded. It publicly affirmed my property rights, and while it didn't mention the woman by name, everyone in the community would know exactly what had happened. My friend told me later that the woman was forced to step down as HOA president at the next board meeting. Apparently, the other board members were furious that she'd exposed the association to potential legal liability over something so easily avoided. The embarrassment of having to publish that clarification was apparently the final straw. I decided to take some additional precautions to prevent future issues. I installed a taller privacy fence around my entire backyard area and added some discrete security cameras. Not because I was particularly worried about more problems, but because I wanted to be prepared if anyone else decided to test my property rights. The rest of that summer was absolutely perfect. I hosted several pool parties for my friends, and it felt amazing to finally be enjoying the space I'd worked so hard to create. From my deck, I could actually see the official HOA community pool in the distance. A much smaller, more crowded space that made me appreciate my own setup even more. Looking back on the whole experience, I'm actually grateful it happened. It taught me the importance of having proper documentation and being willing to stand up to bullies who think they can intimidate people into giving up their rights. My grandmother's meticulous record-keeping, which I'd initially seen as just a quirky trait, ended up being absolutely crucial. The binder that had once been just a collection of old papers became a symbol of legacy and victory. It represented not just legal ownership, but the importance of standing your ground when you know you're right. The sweetest part of the whole victory wasn't just proving I was right. It was making sure the entire community knew the woman who'd been so confident and condescending had been completely wrong. That incident also made me realize how important it is to handle these situations properly from a legal standpoint. If I'd just accepted her demands or gotten into a shouting match, things could have gone very differently. By staying calm, providing documentation, and following up with proper legal action, I not only protected my rights, but sent a clear message that I wouldn't tolerate harassment. The whole experience gave me a much deeper appreciation for the property I'd inherited. It wasn't just a house and a pool. It was a piece of family history that my grandmother had fought to protect decades ago. In a way, standing up to that entitled HOA president was continuing her legacy of not letting anyone push her around. These days, I enjoy my pool in complete peace. The new privacy fence means I don't have to worry about nosy neighbors, and the security cameras give me additional peace of mind. I've never had another issue with anyone from the HOA, and I suspect word has gotten around about what happens when people try to claim authority they don't have. I still see the woman occasionally when I'm out in my yard. She always quickly looks away and hurries past, clearly still embarrassed about the whole situation. I don't feel any need to gloat or make things uncomfortable. The satisfaction of knowing she learned her lesson is enough for me. The whole experience taught me that sometimes the most important battles aren't the biggest ones, but the ones where you stand up for basic principles. Property rights, personal respect, and not letting bullies get away with their behavior. These things matter. When someone tries to intimidate you or claim authority they don't have, documenting everything and responding through proper legal channels can be incredibly effective. I think my grandmother would be proud of how I handled the situation. She was always someone who believed in doing things the right way and not backing down when you know you're in the right. The house and property she refused to sell 30 years ago continue to be a source of independence and pride. Looking forward, I plan to continue enjoying my home and pool for many years to come. I've even started thinking about some additional improvements to the property, maybe a hot tub or an outdoor kitchen area. Whatever I decide to do, I'll make sure to keep all the proper documentation, just in case anyone else gets any ideas about claiming authority over my property. The whole incident also made me more aware of HOA overreach in general. I've heard similar stories from friends and online communities about HOA trying to extend their authority beyond their actual jurisdiction. It's important for property owners to know their rights and have the documentation to back them up when these situations arise. In the end, this story isn't just about a pool or a property dispute. It's about the importance of preparation, standing up for yourself, and making sure entitled people face consequences for their actions. Sometimes the most satisfying victories are the ones where justice is served through proper channels, and the bully has to face the embarrassment of being publicly wrong. The peaceful summer evenings I now spend by my pool, knowing that my rights are secure and my boundaries are respected, make all the effort and expense worthwhile. There's something deeply satisfying about enjoying something you've worked hard for in complete peace, knowing that no one can take it away from you or tell you how to use it. Every time I look at that binder of house documents, I'm reminded that being prepared and knowing your rights is one of the best investments you can make. You never know when someone might try to challenge your authority over your own property, but when they do, having the proper documentation and legal support makes all the difference in the world. Update. 6 months later. Well, I figured you all might want to know how things have been going since my last post. A lot has happened, and honestly, some of it has been pretty entertaining. First off, my friend who lives in the HOA development has been keeping me updated on all the drama that followed my little legal victory. Apparently, the former HOA president didn't take her forced resignation very well. After she stepped down, she tried to rally support from other residents to challenge the board's decision to comply with my lawyer's demands. She went door to door trying to convince people that the HOA should have fought my claims instead of giving in to threats. According to my friend, most people just politely listened and then closed their doors. Turns out when you're trying to convince your neighbors to spend their HOA dues on a legal battle they can't win, people aren't very enthusiastic about it. The new HOA board apparently decided they'd had enough of her troublemaking. My friend sent me a copy of the letter they sent to all residents explaining that the previous president had been acting outside the scope of her authority and that the board would be implementing new procedures to prevent similar incidents. They basically threw her under the bus publicly, which was pretty satisfying to read. But here's where it gets really interesting. About 3 months after the original incident, I was working in my home office when I heard voices coming from my backyard. I looked out the window and saw 2 people I didn't recognize standing by my pool fence taking pictures. One of them was pointing at my house and talking on his phone. I went outside to see what was going on, and it turned out they were real estate agents. The man explained that they were doing a market analysis for a client who was thinking about buying a house in the neighborhood. He said they'd been told by someone that my pool was actually community property and they were trying to determine if that would affect property values in the area. I couldn't help but laugh. I told them exactly what the situation was, showed them my property survey, and explained that whoever had given them that information was completely wrong. The agents were embarrassed and apologetic. They said they'd gotten the tip from a local resident who claimed to be very knowledgeable about the area. I'm pretty sure I know exactly which local resident that was. Apparently, the former HOA president was still trying to cause problems for me, even months later. The agents thanked me for clearing things up and mentioned they'd definitely be verifying any future tips more carefully. That incident made me realize I needed to be more proactive about protecting myself from future harassment. I called my lawyer and asked about getting a restraining order. He said that while her latest attempt wasn't quite enough for a restraining order, we could definitely send another cease and desist letter specifically addressing any attempts to spread false information about my property. The letter we sent this time was even more comprehensive than the first one. It specifically prohibited her from making any false claims about my property to third parties, including real estate agents, contractors, or anyone else. It also made clear that any future harassment would result in immediate legal action for defamation and intentional interference with my property rights. We sent copies to both her directly and to the current HOA board, just to make sure everyone was clear about the boundaries. The lawyer included a note that the HOA board could face liability if they allowed a former board member to continue harassing neighbors while claiming to represent community interests. The response was swift and decisive. Within a week, I received a call from the current HOA president apologizing profusely for the incident with the real estate agents. He assured me that the former president had been formally banned from representing herself as having any authority related to HOA matters. He also mentioned that they were considering pursuing their own legal action against her for potentially damaging the community's reputation. But the real kicker came about a month later. My friend in the development told me that the former president had put her house up for sale. Apparently, she'd been getting increasingly isolated from her neighbors, who were tired of her constant drama and attempts to drag them into conflicts. The stress of the situation and the legal pressure had apparently convinced her it was time to move on. Her house has been on the market for 2 months now, and according to my friend, she's had to drop the price twice because buyers keep asking questions about neighborhood conflicts after doing their research. The irony isn't lost on me that her attempts to affect my property value may have ended up hurting her own. Meanwhile, my property has actually appreciated significantly since I've made all the improvements. I had it appraised recently for insurance purposes, and the value has increased by about $40,000 since I inherited it. The pool renovation was definitely worth the investment, and having clear, undisputed property rights has only added to its value. I've also been enjoying some unexpected benefits from the whole situation. Word has gotten around the local community about my legal victory, and I've had several people reach out to me for advice about their own HOA disputes. Apparently, stories like mine give people hope that it's possible to stand up to entitled board members and win. One woman contacted me about an HOA that was trying to force her to remove a vegetable garden from her front yard. I connected her with my lawyer, and they were able to resolve the issue quickly with a simple letter pointing out that the HOA authority didn't extend to regulating lawful use of private property. She sent me a picture of her tomatoes as a thank you. Another neighbor was dealing with an HOA demanding he remove a flagpole from his yard. Same basic principle. The HOA was overstepping their authority and trying to regulate something they had no legal right to control. After seeing how effective proper legal action could be, he decided to fight back instead of just giving in to keep the peace. I've also made some great connections with other property owners in the area who aren't part of HOA. There's actually a small but active community of us who chose to maintain our independence from these associations. We've started having informal gatherings, and it's been great to meet like-minded people who value property rights and personal freedom. The security cameras I installed have been worth every penny, not just for security, but for peace of mind. I've never had to use the footage for anything serious, but it's nice knowing that if anyone tries to make false claims about what happens on my property, I have video evidence to back up my side of the story. One funny incident happened just last month. I was having a pool party for about 15 of my friends, and we were definitely enjoying ourselves. Music, laughter, the whole thing. The next day, I got a call from a code enforcement officer saying they'd received a noise complaint about a large commercial gathering at my address. I invited the officer to come take a look at my setup and review the footage from my security cameras. It was clear that we'd had a normal social gathering that ended well before any noise ordinances would have applied. The officer was apologetic and mentioned that whoever called in the complaint had made it sound like I was running some kind of business out of my backyard. I'm pretty sure I know who made that call too, but there's no way to prove it. The code enforcement officer did mention that filing false reports was a serious matter, and that repeat offenses could result in fines for the person making the reports. I made sure to get a copy of his report for my records, just in case there's a pattern of harassment I need to document later. The whole experience has really reinforced my belief in the importance of standing up for yourself when you're in the right. If I'd just backed down during that first confrontation, I'd probably still be dealing with people thinking they could walk all over me. By taking a firm legal stance from the beginning, I established clear boundaries that have protected me from ongoing harassment. I've also learned a lot about HOA politics and how these organizations can sometimes attract people who just want to control their neighbors. The current board seems much more reasonable and focused on actual community maintenance rather than power trips. They've even reached out to me about coordinating on some shared infrastructure maintenance where our properties border each other. Looking back, I'm grateful for every aspect of how this situation played out. The initial confrontation was stressful and annoying, but it led to me really understanding my rights and establishing strong legal protections. The follow-up harassment attempts just gave me more opportunities to demonstrate that I won't tolerate that kind of behavior. My pool has been the centerpiece of so many great memories this year. I've hosted birthday parties, family reunions, and just regular weekend hangouts with friends. Every time I'm out there, I remember how close I came to letting someone else dictate how I could use my own property. Standing up for myself was definitely the right choice. The financial investment in the pool renovation and legal fees has paid off in ways I didn't expect. Beyond the property value increase, having a clear legal victory on record has given me credibility in the community. People know I'm not someone who can be easily intimidated, which has actually led to more respect from neighbors rather than conflict. I've been thinking about some additional improvements to the property for next year. Maybe a hot tub, definitely some upgraded landscaping, and possibly a small outdoor kitchen area. Whatever I decide to do, I'll make sure to document everything properly and keep my legal protections up to date. The former HOA president's house finally sold last week, according to my friend. Apparently, she ended up taking a significant loss compared to her original asking price. The new owners seem like nice people who just want to enjoy their home without getting involved in neighborhood drama. I'm looking forward to having normal neighbors again. This whole experience has also made me appreciate my grandmother's wisdom even more. She could have taken the easy money when the developer wanted to buy her property, but she valued independence and family legacy over short-term profit. Her decision to keep detailed records and proper legal documentation has protected not just her rights, but mine as well. I still keep that binder of house documents in a place of honor in my home office. It represents more than just legal papers now. It's a reminder that some battles are worth fighting and that proper preparation can make all the difference when someone tries to take advantage of you. The peace and quiet I enjoy now, knowing that my property rights are secure and my boundaries are respected, makes all the stress and expense of the legal battle worth it. Sometimes standing up for yourself is the best investment you can make, both financially and personally. Thanks to everyone who followed this story and offered support along the way. It's been quite a journey, but I'm happy to report that justice was served and I'm enjoying my pool in complete peace. Here's to property rights, proper documentation, and not letting entitled people get away with their nonsense. The next one is a pro-revenge story. This one might be petty and definitely not as epic as some of the posts I've seen here. And I'm long-winded. Relevant background info first. Anyway, several years ago, I was working at one of the big hardware stores in my area. It's a household name and had some upward mobility with decent pay for the area. I never really found a niche there after my first year and a half. I learned quickly though, so they kind of made me a Swiss Army employee. I could work hardware, plumbing, mix paint, make keys, prepare contracts for installs, and knew all the features and flaws of the appliance models we sold. I was happy to do this because I was building a reputation as someone who could do everything. 2 years in, a new program was implemented that I was uniquely qualified to assist with. They created a new position for me. It was marketed as an all-in-one renovation remodel service for interiors. I was to assist the designer with product selection, product information, contracts, and local marketing for this service. Everyone involved was super excited about it. Note, I was still only making $10 an hour in 2015 for this. The problem was that because this was brand new, no one knew how it should work. The designer basically had to figure it out for herself while I tried to catch her up with all of the store and product knowledge I had accumulated during my unique experience with the company. Issues with the program? 1. It was way too expensive. 2. Product to be used had to come from one of our stores, which was limiting. 3. No one knew about it. It was a rocky start. Coworkers would call me over to talk to customers if they mentioned working on a big project, but that's all we had. No completed jobs to reference or anything provided by corporate to get us running. We made our own stuff. I put together a video advertising the service and got the nod from management to use company card to purchase a TV and media player to roll the video on repeat. We built vignettes in the store to showcase our design ability. I had been picking up a lot from the designer, so it ended up being a partnership in effect. The micromanager. Enter Devin, the assistant manager. He had actually been involved in the project from the beginning and had been pretty supportive and brought good energy at first. But I think he got fed up with issues that we couldn't control. Sloppy contractors refusing to fix things that they messed up. Slow design process as customers worked out what they wanted and people just backing out after taking a bunch of our time when they see the price. We were, on average, charging $3,000 more for a small bathroom remodel on labor alone. Consulting and design fees were also worked into the final cost. The product was discounted to basically being tax-free, but as I mentioned, options were limited to products the company sold. It was just too expensive to make many sales on the poorer side of town where almost everyone knows some kind of contractor or tradesman with connections. It wasn't a good market for this program, but we did manage to start hitting and exceeding our numbers. #7 in the region for the brand new program was not bad. And just when we finally started getting some business and a rhythm around 8 months in, Devin decided that it was not working fast enough for him. Obviously, the designer was to blame since he had no authority over the contractors or setting prices. She didn't know what she was doing and he was going to make some changes. He honestly didn't do much besides hover, bring bad energy, and make terrible suggestions. He didn't understand the scope of what we had to do to get a customer out the door and happy. He forced us to cut corners and get the sale as quickly as possible without concern for liability, for basically destroying a room in someone's home to remake it, or what was realistic in terms of timelines. Customers felt rushed and got nervous. They backed out. We came to a standstill. We would only have 2 or 3 designs in progress at a time, but suddenly, after working our asses off building the program, we had no customers for the first time in 6 months. Obviously, Devin was not subjecting us to his authority hard enough, so he went harder and fired the designer. I lost my patience. Justice, or Injustice IDK. I'm a chill dude, but I had been working my ass off for this company, making peanuts on the promise that I was working towards something. I endured working for the incompetent managers that got their positions because they started working there at 18 and made it their life. The toxic alpha male, I will lead, you will follow BS was too much. So I started bullying him back, making fun of him in a teasing way where he couldn't really react without looking bad or losing control. I did that for a while, and he left me alone to run the program in the interim since I was the only option. The designer and I had become friends though, so I was still mad about how it went down. I wasn't finished yet, but I didn't know what to do. Eventually they got another designer, and Devin had me move back to what I had been doing before. passed over for several promotions that I was more than qualified for. The market had been flooded with long-time employees that were being moved around. Bad luck, but I was done with the place. One day we were sent an email link to an anonymous manager review survey. The store computers were set up with an always-on and logged-in user profile, so I wrote down the link and verified with a coworker that they weren't unique. In every department I visited that day, I wrote a review for Devon. All different ratings, some good, some bad, but I made the good ones so that they sounded bad, but as if I didn't know it was bad. I did that maybe 10 times. It wasn't character assassination or anything, just opinion-based stuff with some vague examples, so no one could figure out it was me. I didn't lie either. I just said what people don't usually say out loud. He would barely look at anyone after that. A couple of weeks later, he resigned his position as assistant manager and took an exterior design position at the other end of the store, as far away from the departments he had been over before. Basically the same thing as what we had done with interiors, but he was in the designer's shoes. I left a couple of months later to work tech support for DHS, but while I was still in training for that, my friends from the store told me he had gotten fired. Maybe he learned something? He should at least have learned how my designer friend felt. They were both fired at Christmas. Anyway, thank you for watching.